Okay, why don't we get started this morning. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on your time zone. My name is Angela Brooks, and I'm the Manager of Global Marketing at DISYS, and I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar. Our topic is the Essential Agile Product Owner Partnering with the Development Team. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. To jumpstart our discussion, one moment, I'm just going to go to our slides. To jumpstart our discussion, we want to provide some feedback on your responses to the registration survey question. As you may remember, our first question was, how often are Agile methods employed for software development in your organization? As you can see, the responses were nearly equal across all 5 categories, with the majority using Agile less than 25% of the time, at 34%. We're lucky to have Bob Galen with us today. He's an Agile coach and expert with a passion for Agile and Scrum. Bob's expertise in this area will be sure to convert those of you who have used Agile only less than 35% of the time to the other side of the pie chart, to the 2/5 of you that are using Agile methods more than 50% of the time or all the time. Moving on to our second question, we asked you, what is your organization's biggest Agile development challenge? As you can see, excuse me, achieving collaboration and teamwork, as well as responding to changing requirements, tied at 24% and 25%. Attaining customer satisfaction and delivering working software also tied at 5% each. Clearly, the biggest challenge you're having is categorized here for our purposes in other at 41%. With Bob's presentation and your questions for him today, we should learn a lot more today about your most critical Agile challenges. I'd like to formally introduce Bob Galen. Bob is part of DISYS's Fellows program. He works with us on critical customer projects and shares his thought leadership with DISYS and our customers through webinars such as this one. He has more than 12 years of Agile and Scrum experience with several certifications and is the author of the book Scrum Product Ownership, Balancing Value from the Inside Out. Bob, thanks for being with us today. Would you like to say a few words?
Absolutely. Thank you, Angela. I appreciate the nice introduction and the kind words, and I do appreciate the opportunity DISYS has given me to share about Agile. Now, I don't know if I'm going to meet the challenge that you said of converting everyone, or not everyone, but some people from one line of the percent of usage to the other, but I'll do my very best to try to meet the challenges that we get in the questions and to get people enthusiastic or even more enthusiastic about Agile. I just don't know if we need to measure the outcome of that. So we'll see how I do.
Well, fair enough, Bob. Thanks so much. Before I turn the webinar over to you, Bob, I did want to let people know that they can ask questions during the webinar, throughout the webinar, using the questions feature in the control panel on the right-hand side of the screen. And then we're going to reserve time at the end to answer those questions. Also, everyone, you may remember that we're going to give away 10 copies of Bob's book today, a $25 value. And we thought it would be fun if the first 5 people to ask questions after Bob starts presenting his content would win a copy. So the first 5 after he starts presenting will win a copy of his book. Also, we'll select at random 5 other lucky winners from today's attendees list. We'll announce those at the end of the webinar, and if we don't have your full address information on file, then we'll just get in contact with you via email and request your address, and we can ship the book to you. Lastly, I want to let everyone know that we are recording today's webinar, and we'll send you a link to the recording within 24 hours following the webinar. So everyone, thanks again for joining us today. We know your time is valuable, and we do appreciate your participation and your interest in this topic. Bob, I'm going to change the presenter screen to you now, and take it away. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you. So let me get my screen up to everyone and see how this works. So you all should be seeing, I think we have we flipped these slides and now I'm in control. That's a dangerous thing for everyone, so hopefully you can trust me for the ride for the next 55 minutes. Again, I want to thank Angela and DISYS for giving me the opportunity to talk about something that's pretty near and dear to my heart, which is Agile product ownership and product management, and give me the opportunity to share with you all. I want to thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're at. For taking your lunchtime if you're on the East Coast and investing in the ride. So let's see a little bit about me, just a real quick introduction. I have a lot of experience, so the words there sort of imply that I have a lot of experience. I've been using Scrum formally since about 2000. XP, Extreme Programming Practices, since around that same time frame. I'm currently an independent Agile coach. I'm a fellow with DISYS. The real thing to keep in mind here is I've done Agile coaching, but I'm also worked during day jobs and worked with real teams, so I have some real experience. I try to keep my experience in the quote-unquote real world and to keep my my techniques and my experience sharp. So that's what you'll hear. I'm going to share some stories with you from real teams that I was a part of in coaching. To make some of the points about what are good Agile product management practices. Now, all that being said, I am unapologetically an enthusiast about the Agile methods, and hopefully you hear some of that enthusiasm coming through. It's not youthful enthusiasm, it's sort of practiced and pragmatic enthusiasm. They're not a silver bullet, they're not for the faint of heart, they're not for every situation. But quite frankly, in my 30-plus years, they're the best way to develop software that I've found. And I hope some of you are finding that those same lessons. When I say product owner, what do I mean? It's an overloaded term. It comes from Scrum. One of the key roles in the Scrum Agile methodology is the product owner. The other two roles in Scrum that you may or may not be aware, one is the team. So you identify the team as a role, you identify the Scrum Master as a role, and you identify the product owner as the role. I'm using that term, but I really mean, it can mean customer. It could be direct customer. It could be indirect customer, a representative or a surrogate for the customer. It could be a business analyst, someone feeding the team requirements. It could be a stakeholder. It could be combinations of all of these folks. Very typically, it's a product manager, in my experience. Quite often, product managers, traditional product managers, get sort of knighted to become a product owner in the Scrum team. Requirement provider, it's anyone who's tasked with describing and accepting this business-facing value produced by an Agile team. So clearly the reference is Scrum-centric, but it's sort of this voice of the customer. And there's an emphasis here of acceptance, meaning you ask the team for something, and at the end of an iteration, they provide that something to you, and you sign off on it. It meets your expectations, or you give them feedback, and you say, this doesn't meet my expectations, and they do some rework to figure out how they meet your expectations. So on a discrete use case or a discrete story basis. So that's what I mean by product owner. The audience, it's truly not just product owners, centric. It could be any member of a team. I think good, healthy, Agile teams understand the different roles. So the team should understand the expectations of the Scrum Master and the product owner. The product owner should understand the expectations, the behaviors, the healthy behaviors of a team and their Scrum Master, etc. I think anyone. I think this presentation can help any Agile team. My hope is it's not Scrum-centric, but it's methodology agnostic. In XP, for example, there is the notion of a customer. All of the Agile methods have the notion of driving business value via a customer being engaged with the team. So there's this whole team, what I'm implying is a whole team view, where the team collaborates on work, they elaborate stories. In this case, I'm referencing user stories, but it could be any requirement artifact. They deliver value, and value is in the eye of the beholder, is in the eye of the customer in this case. The customer is defining what they want. Value is in priority of delivery. Value is in requirement specification. And then the team delivers on quality as well. So there's this collaborative view of, doing the most important things first, the customer working with the team, deciding that it's met the expectations, the acceptance, and it's also met the quality agreements that the team has had. So generally, anyone on the team, I think, is a targeted audience. My focus for this talk is to the pattern, pun intended, that I'm going to go through. Is I'm going to explain what I would call a simple pattern that I've seen, and then I'm going to morph it or try to amplify what I want the team to do. So there's simple patterns which are commonplace, and they're good. But I want to emphasize, then go from simple agile patterns from a product owner perspective. I want to then go to essential patterns, what I think are these sort of high performance patterns, getting to the next level, and amplify what I think great looks like from a product ownership perspective. I'm going to sprinkle out throughout the presentation some stories from the trenches, and try to share some real stories as depending on the time that we have. So the first simple pattern and the question is, who owns the backlog? The simple pattern is the product owner, and you see this in Scrum, is the product owner owns the product backlog. A lot of teams, a lot of inexperienced teams or youthful teams, you'll find that they put the burden of writing all the stories and all the prioritization and all of the backlog management, they put that burden on the back of the product owner. Because the book says that the product owner owns the product backlog. And I think a better pattern, a higher performance pattern, is it takes a village to own the backlog. And what I mean by that is anyone on the team, from my point of view, anyone can write a story and contribute it to the backlog. Anyone can have a priority and assign a priority or create a dialogue around why this is important and have that conversation with the product owner. And when I say anyone, it could be developers on the team, it could be the Scrum Master, it could be testers on the team, BAs on the team. It really takes sort of a village. The much more powerful view to the backlog is not one person is the final arbiter, but a whole team view to that. So what are some of those contributors? It could be stakeholders, executives, and I want them to take, very often, in traditional methods, stakeholders are abstracted from the requirements. They define them up front and then they sort of walk away, and then they come in at the end and expect the great reveal where they're delighted or they're disappointed, where people are given bonuses or they're fired. The project is a success or failure. In Agile, you're trying to get everyone engaged in this organic thing called a backlog and dialoguing around it all the time, making priority calls all the time, looking at what the team has produced, and then making modifications to it. So the village in this case is project managers, scrum masters, developers, testers, business analysts, like I said. I want everyone to be sort of scrumming around, no pun intended, but scrumming around the backlog and providing insights, writing stories, refining the stories, suggesting ways to break them down, looking at the backlog and saying it's a workflow. It's a work breakdown structure to some degree, so suggesting like the flow of events, what should come first, what should come second, what should come third in deployment. So what are some of the injection or influence points for the village to really engage in the backlog? One aspect is getting active in sprint reviews. The sprint reviews are a wonderful ceremony in Agile where you can, the team shows off the results of the last sprint. Let's say that sprint was 2 weeks. So they work hard for 2 weeks and they show off their wares. And they're not just showing off working code to get credit for it. It's done. But they're looking for feedback. They're looking for, feedback on what's great and what has delighted the audience, the stakeholders, and what has not. And they're looking to then embrace that feedback and make adjustments in their sprint into the backlog. You can sit with or visit the team. You can, daily interactions. You feel free that there should be an open door in your environment where you can go by and take a look, not in an annoying or an interruptive way, but engage with the team. You can have the courage to tell truth to leadership and the team. So it's tell the team that they delighted you, or tell the team that they didn't. There should be an emphasis on working code that's reviewed, accepted, and deployed, or deployable, that it's done. You hear this notion in the Agile community of doneness or done, and that's crucial for getting whatever's done at the end of a sprint to have it meet the acceptance criteria and the doneness criteria that the team, the organization, the business has set up. Sharing your vision and your goals and your ownership. So having leadership share charter, there's a notion that I've been amplifying lately of project chartering. And a lot of Agile teams don't charter. They think that it's a traditional technique. And I think chartering, that practice of setting up a charter and establishing a mission and a vision and criteria and dependencies and things related to a project is crucial. It is importantly you want to have a decisive voice around this. So you want while you have a village, there needs to be a final arbiter. So there needs to be per backlog, per team, a deciding voice, or there can be only one product owner. So don't get confused that the village, this paradigm I'm suggesting of a village creating chaos. It's not. You want input, you want feedback, you want engagement, but you need this translation of who is the one product owner that sort of arbitrates across all that wonderful feedback. So that's the first sort of level setting event that I want, from moving from a product owner owns the backlog to the village, and I think that's a really healthy pattern for you to keep in mind, or a vision for you to keep in mind as where you want to go. The more it's a quality step for me from my coaching. The more people that are contributing and engaging on teams in the backlog, it may sound like it's chaotic, but to me it's a health check. It's the more the merrier from my point of view. At least it says that it minimally says that people are engaging in the work, which is very healthy. The next pattern I want to explore is this. The simple pattern is defining a sprint goal. If you've read the Scrum books of the literature, there is this notion, a lot of teams forget it, in their heat to do sprint planning and to do task decomposition, they forget that the book, the Scrum book, the Black Book by Schwaber, does talk about defining, not just breaking your backlog elements, your stories, into tasks, but talks about defining a sprint goal for a sprint, so that the team exits sprint planning with two things. They have a sprint backlog, tasking, decomposition, a game plan, but they also come out of it with a defining goal. What are they? What a universal goal that they're trying to accomplish. A lot of teams forget that, even in the simple pattern case, and I like to amplify goaling, not soccer goaling, but goaling, setting a goal setting, as incredibly crucial as a simple pattern. And then I think the essential pattern takes it even a step further. Whether you're leading with your goals, goals become central. You stop talking about tasks and you stop talking about stories per se, and you start talking, and the team starts talking about, what is our goal for this sprint? What are we all trying to achieve? What does success look like at the end? And I want you to lead with them. So, and there's different levels. Another aspect that I like to emphasize with teams, and this is on this sort of the more essential pattern side, is goals are multi-tiered. You can have release level goals where the team is operating towards a release point. They're sprinting. They have multiple sprints that are intended to meet a goal for a release, a functional release. Then each sprint has goals, and then if you drill into the stories in the backlog, each feature has this notion of acceptance or acceptance criteria. So there's feature level goals, there's story level goals, there's sprint level goals, there's release level goals. They're all interconnected, or they should be interconnected. They're what's driving the team. The team has an understanding of where they're going. One of the unhealthier things I think I see in teams sometimes is they're delivering lots of stories. They're delivering small chunks. They go into sprint, the sprint review or the sprint demo, and they show a disparate set of pieces of working code. But what they fail sometimes to do is to connect the dots from a user perspective, from a customer perspective. Like, what problem are you specifically trying to solve? What workflow are you trying to deliver in an end-to-end fashion, and then demonstrate what value are you trying to deliver to your customer? And it's not, usually that value is not a disparate set of tasks or stories. It's a workflow. It's a feature. It's something that's cohesive. So you want the goals to give you this cohesion, and it helps. I mentioned earlier the chartering, being value-driven, envisioning over your stories and tasks. And yes, you can talk about stories and tasks, but it's the overriding goals. What are we trying to deliver at the end of this? I want to talk about or share a couple goal-setting stories to sort of get the importance. I can't amplify enough the why am I harping about goals? Because I see so many teams that don't think they're important, that short shrift the goals and worry about tasks and burn down charts and story evolution. And I want you to go away from this talk. One of the takeaways is to start goaling more, to start goal setting more. So I'll start with the bottom. Rob is a product owner that I work with, and the company in this case was doing an email marketing tool, and they were reframing their message. So an email marketing software as a service product, and they were refactoring the entire message creation engine. So if you think of that from an email marketing perspective, this is a central interface for the customers, and they wanted to move from a non-intuitive sort of legacy message creation creation engine to something that was much more intuitive for their small to medium-sized business customers. They realized, again in an Agile sense, they realized that they didn't want to deliver it in one large chunk. They wanted to deliver it I'm sorry. I wanted to pause there for a second. I got a message on my screen. They wanted to release it in a series of release chunks so that they could get real customer feedback. So the product owner in this sense needed to paint a picture of how are we going to evolve a set of releases, a set of deliverables in such a way with the team so that the team could figure out how to architect the software. So his first release he articulated as a minimal marketable feature. It was to create entry into the marketplace. It didn't have to be fully featured. Now what was delivered needed to work, and it needed to work well, but it was going to be just a very minimalist set of usable features to get entry and to start showing the customers that they were moving from this non-intuitive, very legacy, clunky-based interface to something that was very, very new. It was a place to, there was a UX team here that was designing new interfaces, so it was a place to sort of expose to the customer new interactions as well, new visual interactions and new workflow interactions. Then release 2, he set the tone of we're going to do, once we have entry and we're getting customer feedback, we need to work on stabilization of that and adding and making the interfaces and the code, the features more robust. But at the same time, in the MMF in release 1, they had only released a small set of templates. Now they were going to release a lot of templates. So the template library was also going to be part of release 2. And then in release 3, they had deferred complex editing to a third release to add what really a lot of the customers would want, the effort savings on editing. The product owner in this sense set up this release 1, release 2, release 3 high-level set of goals that then the stories, the backlog lined up with. It was really crucial to have this sort of what I would think of as mission and vision. And this was shared with the team before release 1 was even started, that there was going to be this workflow. So I hope you can see where the connect the dots would really be helpful to the team. Let's say they were even falling behind. They would find that, they had an MMF, a minimal marketable feature, so even that definition helped them to decide when they were doing micro-feature trade-offs, if they were falling behind or falling ahead, what to defer for release 2 and what to pull in from release 2. And both of those directions happened along the way. A survival goal. I'm going to switch to the top and talk about Michael. Michael was a product owner, different company, brand new company. This was an entrepreneurial startup, and I remember them well. I remember getting a call from them as an Agile coach, and they were looking for someone to come in. They were sort of not waterfall. They were a chaos-driven environment. They really didn't have a method, and they were selected for a venture capital demo, a capital acquisition demo in California at the time, and it was very prestigious, opportunity for them to go out, and they got 6 minutes on stage to demonstrate their product and to get funding. That was the invitation they got, and the reason they called me is they had never hit a date yet. They had never really been able to to drive towards a data and deliver working code. So they have this inclination of doing Scrum. And I sort of laughed. I'm like, the last thing you want to do if money's on the table and you're at risk because you're a startup for this early financing to probably change your methods. But they twisted my arm and they convinced me. And I went in and did some Scrum training, and they put a backlog together, and they started sprinting. They had exactly 25 days. So that was the countdown to the demo in California. And the sprint goal in this case was a compelling, so it was really something that they put together. They said, we need funding, we need to survive. So it was a survival sprint goal of we need to produce a 6-minute compelling demo that generates investor interest and generates early financing for our business to succeed. That was their sprint goal. And what they demoed and how they demoed was variable. So certainly they put together a backlog that they thought would support that sprint goal. But then after 2 days they realized, oh my gosh, there's bugs here, or there's an architectural limit there, and they realized that their initial backlog, their initial plans changed. Every time they made an adjustment, though, they looked at what is our goal, what does compelling mean, how do we really explore the compelling aspects of our product, and the goal drove all of the adjustments they made based on the discoveries they had. I remember getting a call in California at 5 in the morning from Michael, and he said, you know, something has changed. Are we allowed to change the backlog? Are we allowed to change the sprint? And I'm like, you know, have you voided your goal? Have you put your goal at risk? And he said, yes. And I said, of course you do. You can make an adjustment. You can make a change. He was like, the team is looking for me to provide guidance. I'm like, yes, provide that guidance. Go to your goal. Redefine what compelling means, what you think will be compelling from a finance perspective. Talk to stakeholders, talk to the founders, and make those adjustments relative to the goal. And that became incredibly crucial for them. And I thought to myself afterwards, if this was a waterfall team, they would have blindly executed their original plan, but they would not have adjusted. And they wouldn't have had sort of a lighthouse. And the goal in this case, the survival goal, the sprint goal, was a lighthouse. It kept them on point to where they were going. So I hope that gave you a feeling for goaling and why it's important. The third pattern I want to talk about is backlog management. The simple pattern is backlog grooming. There is this term in the Agile community called backlog grooming, or you just work on stories on your backlog sort of continuously, and you sample them often. And I don't know how regular teams do that or not. I think teams short shrift that quite often. In the heat of battle, in the heat of delivering code, they forget that the backlog is organic and it needs to be continuously groomed, and they sort of look at that as a lower priority activity. And I couldn't disagree more with that. I think it's part of continuous planning and continuous requirement and emergent requirements, and it's incredibly important. Let's amplify that and talk about the essential pattern that I want you to think about: active and congruent backlog grooming. And I think that's crucial for your teams to really make progress. So what are some of the, let me play around with this. I may have gone too far. No, I'm right on track. Oh, well, let me pause here for just a second. And I want to, we're throwing out some books for questioners, and I want to encourage people to ask questions around almost on anything related to product ownership or product backlogs or you know, the requirement side of Agile teams, and you know, type them in and give us your questions. Make this session, I know it's not that interactive, but try to make it as interactive as you can. So I want to embrace the questions, and I'll do my best at the end to try to answer them. And it can be in line with these slides or this topic, or it can be sort of, you know, peripheral to it, and I'll do the best I can at trying to answer them and facilitate. But I would rather have, I think having more questions would be a good problem. So influencing grooming dynamics, one of the things I want you to realize is that as a product owner, you can influence when you have to be careful. You're in a tremendous influence position. So the best way I can describe that is I can talk about Max. And Max was a product owner who I know and love at an e-commerce company that I work with. And he was incredibly, Max, and that's his real name, so if he's listening to this, you know, tip of the hat to Max, because he was a great product owner. But more importantly than that, he was also very incredibly well-liked with his team and incredibly influential to his team. He was personable, he was an extrovert, he had good product knowledge, the team really trusted him, and there was this wonderful relationship with the team. And I remember when we would go into sprint planning and in grooming, that Max would have this ability to influence the estimates of the team. I called it the Max effect. I'll use sprint planning as an example, but it happened in all of our grooming as well. So the team, if you know what happens in sprint planning and grooming, the teams are either tasking out a story or they're estimating the size of the story. So in grooming, if the team estimated something at 10 or 15, 13 points or 20 points, Max might raise an eyebrow, or he might cough, or his body language, he might shift, or he might look sad. And what I started noticing is the team paid attention to his reactions to what they said. And then they would cut. If Max was unhappy, so if he smiled, that would say, hey, it's good. That estimate was good. So Max, you know, we're okay. But if he didn't like an estimate, if he coughed or he was uncomfortable, or God help us if he even verbalized and said, boy, that sounds like an awful lot of time, what would happen is the team would start cutting the estimate. They would start trying to please Max. And it was not uncommon for a 20-point story, which is a large story using story points, to be cut to a 3-point story or something by the team just based on Max's body language. I'd like to think that he wasn't doing it intentionally all the time, that it was just his natural body language. I think he did it intentionally every once in a while. But the point is, he needed to be aware. The last thing he wanted to do was influence negatively, meaning artificially influence what the team, how they were sizing or how they were designing or how they were thinking about their work. He wanted to explain the what was needed, and the why behind it, the business why, the problems that were trying to be solved. But he needed to abstract himself, either formally or informally, even with body language, away from influencing the team. The team was there to please to a fault, and I coached Max to be very cautious about how he behaved himself, even to the point of challenging the team. One way to counteract this was to challenge the team to do it well, to challenge the team to make sure they weren't cutting corners, they weren't hacking things together. Todd was a founder in that startup company I was talking about, and I remember when we were preparing for that demo, that he was a developer as well. He was the CTO and a developer. And every developer in the table, when we were planning the first sprint, would look to Todd for permission about how long it would take. And again, you have to be careful about your influence and be cognizant of your influence. The team is paying attention to you. And it's sort of this two-edged sword. If you're doing a great job and you're well-liked, you have to be even more careful. So active backlog grooming, I want you to think in terms of active backlog grooming. Bring goals and stories to the table, but be open-minded. Listen actively as a product owner. Don't predetermine size nor complexity in your own mind. I wish I had a dime every time I heard a product owner, oh, I'm surprised that that's so complex. Oh, that can't be that hard to do. It's trivial. Those things undermine sort of the trust model with the team. Yes, you can challenge it. Yes, you can ask why. Why is that so hard? And have that wonderful discussion. But what you want to do is sort of trust the team. You're not negotiating. There's the role. The role of the product owner is to ask, is to define what and why it's there. It's the role of the team is to determine how long it's going to take, what are the design and how they're going to approach it, and to keep those healthy boundaries. You can explore execution dynamics for architecture, for testing non-functional test requirements. You can talk about deployment. In fact, you should. When you're exploring the backlog, it's not just about features. It's about how do you put those and integrate those features together and get them out the door and get them released. There is no magic at release. So the execution dynamics, the workflow, how do you get deployment-ready software, customer-ready software, get it packaged, get it documented. That's part of the story mix in the backlog. You can apply pressure on value and quality and sustainable pace rather than on getting more done. The more you can focus on, team, I want you to really focus on the value to the customer. And part of your role, I think, is to focus on the quality and not to overwork. And what I mean by sustainable pace is not so much not working overtime, but being cognizant that teams that are ridden too hard will introduce errors and will eventually slow down. So you have to be cognizant of doing it well, doing it in the long term, and those conversations that you can have in grooming can have a powerful effect on your team. The backlog it needs to be continuously groomed. It's organic. So you need to have this view that I'm working on it all the time. You're never done. It's not cyclical, and it's not a simple set of features. If you turn it on its side, I have one of these views where if you take a product backlog, a vertical backlog, and you turn it horizontally on its side, it looks like a work breakdown structure, or WBS. It starts looking like a workflow. The higher priority features are what are elements in the backlog or what needs to be done right away. The lower priority features prior to release are what needs to be done prior to the release. And that could be regression testing or integration testing or system test or UAT. There is this flow, there is this project level flow to the backlog that shouldn't be denied. It's not just a feature, and then magic happens and it coalesces in a customer's lap sort of view. There's hard work to coalesce a set of features and get it customer ready very often. So you want to visit it often. You want to take your time in gathering understanding and determining your path. And leverage the team here. This is not, go back to the village. This is not just your burden as a product owner too. You want to foster that village attitude. The next pattern I want to emphasize is this big picture, this release planning, and I want to get into the essential pattern, which is multi-threaded look ahead. And I just took a peek at my clock, and I'm trying to do some time management here, so I'm a little bit behind, so I'll probably start cutting the stories just a little bit down, but trying to get the points across. So the essential pattern is multi-threaded look ahead. What do I mean by that? And I've been alluding to this. I like to think the analogy for me of a product backlog is a tapestry that has threads that have focus in different areas. So clearly most teams have a view that there's a feature thread in the backlog. Another default position is value increments, that you're producing the highest value features first. So those are almost by default, they're table stakes. A lot of teams don't think of other threads like architecture, design, process, quality, testing, readiness, getting it ready for production and review, refactoring, bug fixing, things like that. You want to be guiding towards customer value, but you want to be thinking in terms of looking at the backlog and saying, where do I see architecture emerging? Where is there good design? Do we have a thoughtful design? Have we represented design well through the backlog? Have we done a job of that? Do we have dependencies managed? Do we have risk managed? Those are the things that you want to be also looking for threads. And when I mean threads, it's story elements. There should be stories in the backlog that are connected sprint over sprint over sprint, leading to a release that give you a feeling for, hey, how are we handling? Are we ready for deployment? Have we considered regulatory requirements? Have we considered documentation, etc.? I want to talk about some unhealthy patterns just to get you to think unhealthy backlogs, to give you the counterpoint to what isn't good. The PO drops off a list, so don't do that. Don't walk into your team and say, here's the list, go execute it and call me when you're done. Overloaded priorities, like you have a 1A, a 1B, a 1C. You're too short-sighted on the small side or too robust on the long side. So depending on, you have a short view, we're only looking at one sprint ahead, or you're looking at 100 sprints ahead. Both ends of that spectrum are unhealthy. You trivialize dependencies or pretend that they're not there. Simplistic testing assumed. You assume a model where, well, testing just happens automatically within each story. That's not true in many contexts. You need legacy testing, you need regression testing, etc. You ignore value. You trivialize deployment. You trivialize, that's extended deployment. You trivialize the activity getting it ready for a real customer release. There's real work. You may need to do customer support training. You may need to do documentation. You may need to do production database readiness checks. and scripting to get your databases ready, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those activities should show up in the backlog from my point of view. Healthy postures, the counterpoint, allow the solution to emerge, be just in time. You want to look ahead, but not too far ahead, and iterate. It's a sliding window. One of the analogies I have now of backlogs is it's sort of a conveyor belt with a sliding window view. The conveyor belt is moving sprint by sprint by sprint closer to the team, and the product owner is governing this sliding window that's getting things ready in the conveyor belt for the team. And part of that is getting the next set of stories for the next sprint ready. They're very finely grained, but part of it is doing look ahead for the next release even. So if you remember Rob, he was talking about those 3 connected releases. That gave him a framework for connecting the dots release over release over release. Now going back to Rob, keeping in mind what we were releasing roughly at a 8-week interval there. So when I said Rob had painted the picture of 3 releases, it's really, you know, perhaps a 6-month period of time that he was looking ahead. He wasn't looking 5 years down the road, but he was looking out with epics and things like that, out beyond the next few sprints. You want to think, a very good paradigm is to think in terms of delivery to your customers. Don't think of stories, don't think of necessarily of tasks. Think in terms of sprint goals and release goals, and drive those goals by thinking of delivery to your customer. What are we going to deliver? What are we going to hand them? What is the marketing literature going to look like for that? And then driving the goals from that. That's an incredibly healthy way to think about it. Another pattern is this notion of innovation and keeping the big picture in mind. The simple pattern is work with a team. Product owners work with a team. And I think most product owners, I hope, most product owners sit with the teams or in close proximity to the teams, and they reserve time to spend with the team. The essential pattern is cementing a creative partnership between the PO and the team, where you're collaborating with the team and you're creating sort of this view where we're in this together. And I'll use Link as an example. Link was a product owner, one that I think got the role very well in an e-commerce company. And one of the things that Link would do periodically is he would, you know, bring lunch in for his team, and he would talk about the competitive landscape out there with the company's competitors. And he would present independent market research and his own personal research on the product mix that team was competing with, the pros and cons, the evolution, who was ahead of the team, who was behind the team, why, what were the compelling feature sets, and then he would start transitioning from competitive landscape across a variety of competitors to what was his response to it, what was going to be his strategic response. And he would weave into that technology innovation that might be useful. He would do this on a quarterly basis, sometimes a little bit more frequently. And he was sharing his strategy. He was sharing the challenge set. He was sharing the problem set. But he was also sharing his long-term strategy. And then he was looking to foster the team's ideas. He would then start wrapping up their ideas in his own strategy and crafting the strategy. He was trying to, from my point of view, and I know he was doing this intentionally, he was trying to turn it from him being the product owner to the entire team was the product owner. Him having the creative vision to the entire team having the creative vision. Him understanding the customer's problems and trying to come up with solutions to those problems, creative, innovative solutions, to having the team understand what the problem landscape and the challenge landscape was, so that the team, with him serving as a mentor and a coach and a primary guide, but having the team solve problems. There were neat things that would happen. You know, team members in their sprint planning and in their backlog grooming would talk in terms of, oh, there would be a 20-point story that Link would have written. And the team would come up and say, no, we have some code in place, and you know what? If we can actually solve that problem that you're trying to solve in 20 points, we can solve it much more simply with a 3-point story, and we can sort of refactor some code over here. So knowing what the customer challenge set was enabled the team to come up and partner with Link for much more creative solutions that were shorter, that were faster, that were simpler, and that were on point. And that was this wonderful synergy, and you saw it, and they started leaping sort of tall bounds in the competitive, tall buildings in the competitive landscape. And I go back to what a root reason for that, or driver, was Link's efforts in creating the shared partnership. So shared ownership, that wisdom of the crowds. So what am I trying to say? I'd like to influence all of you to to foster that kind of an environment where you allow the team. It may sound counterintuitive, but allow the team time to explore. Allow the team experimentation time, stretch time. Always draw learning from retrospectives. Know, as a product owner, know when to push and know when to pull. Know when to just shut up and allow. I've explained to you this situation. Let there be some cook time. I think it's also important for you to share your pressures, the business. Link was sharing, it was an ugly, in some cases, it was a very ugly competitive landscape. The team was very uncompetitive in specific areas. Instead of trying to buffer that from the team, he shared those challenges with them. And it served to energize them. That challenge became shared across all team members. It just wasn't his cross to bear. And it served as momentum and a morale builder for the team. They looked at it as their challenge with Link. Built to last is another pattern I want to share. The simple pattern is, of course, quality. Of course, Agile says, build quality in. Of course, it's sort of ingrained in the methods, so we don't really need to talk about it very much. The teams get it. But I don't know if they do. I think the essential pattern from a product owner perspective is you need to have this mantra of build it right, keep it clean, no matter the cost. Jim Complian, he was responding to a point on a Scrum Alliance leadership board, discussion board, and I like his view here, where he talks about, if you read this, he differentiates value. Value doesn't matter when examining technical debt. What he tries, and this is sort of a strong position where he's saying that the product owner really isn't an arbiter of technical debt. It's the team. And what he's trying to say is that business value, yes, there's business value and you drive that, but you can't drive business value at the risk of creating an unsustainable product, an unsustainable infrastructure. You can't create features without fixing bugs, without refactoring your code, particularly if you have a long-lived application. That you, as a product owner, you need to have a balanced view. Yes, you need to compete. So Link needed to compete on features, but he also needed to compete on robustness. The app needed to hang together. It needed to have performance. It needed to meet its performance requirements. It needed to have low defects. It needed to have high quality. He had to pay for both. And in this case, well, you don't necessarily know what the quality what the quality balance is in the app. You have to trust your team to that. Listen to your team. You have to ask the right questions. You have to foster an environment where the team can put refactoring, redesign, clean up stories on the backlog. You have to create a landscape where you embrace bug fixes as well. You embrace repairs. You don't deflect it. You don't ignore them. Now, the balance, the ratio of features to bug fixes to refactoring, that's subject to change sprint over sprint and release over release. But that you are cognizant of that investment is incredibly important. And your team needs to know that you have that balanced view. Otherwise, they won't bring things to you. So they'll allow the software, for example, if you show them by your actions and by your body language that you don't care about refactoring, if you always deflect it back, if you always sort of argue against it, they will stop talking to you about refactoring. That doesn't mean that your code base isn't brittle. That means it's actually getting brittler, and the team has just shut down and stopped and realized that you don't care about it. And I think you need to have that balance. So this technical debt term comes in. It's intentional versus unintentional technical debt. You want to think in terms of those two sides. I have a term that I look for in my teams when I hear the term hacking, either in grooming sessions. Oh, if we hack that code, it's 5 points. If we do it right, it's 20 points. Well, the answer is not the 5 points. Hacking is not the goal. Doing it well, not perfectly, but doing it well is the goal. So expressing this balanced view to technical debt and embracing it and understanding what it is I think it's part of the entry criteria for excellent product ownership. You have to show that balance. I bring up this slide here only as a as a reminder. Many folks aren't aware of this, that there's a manifesto, there's an Agile manifesto, there's a project leadership manifesto. Agile is almost over manifestoed to some degree, but don't let that shut you off. There's a craftsmanship manifesto, and I think this is crucially important to share with your teams. This is more of a reminder for you to remind your teams that you need them to be building great code. You do not want to be, rework is the enemy in Agile. You do not want to go back and rework code based on refactoring debt or technical debt or bugs or whatever have you. You want to be able to count on it being professionally done the way you've defined it and then move on. It will undermine your velocity, it will undermine your progress if you do that. So sharing this with your team can be very effective. So wrapping up, I think I've left about 10 minutes or so for questions. I just want to review the patterns. It takes a village to own the backlog. I want you to lead with goals, active and congruent backlog grooming, this multi-threaded look ahead. Make sure that you're not just feature-centric with your backlog. Remember Link in that creative partnership. He got incredible payback for the investments he made. And then never ever short shrift. Keep it, build it right, keep it clean no matter the cost. You will see a payback in your velocity. You will see a payback in delighting your customer. So I'm not going to answer, these are just rhetorical questions, what ideas do I miss, etc. I want to thank everyone for the time, and then I want to hand it back to Angela for some Q&A and see where we go with that. And again, thank you everyone. If anyone peels away, I really appreciate the 50 minutes you spent with us, and let's see where we go with the questions.
Hi, Bob. Thank you so much. That was fantastic, and we have a lot of questions. So great participation from our audience today. Let me go ahead and just start from the top. One person asked, do you have a Twitter handle?
Oh my gosh, I can't. Yes, I do, but I don't. I'm not. I think it's Bob Galen, all one word. So yes.
Okay, excellent.
I'm old-fashioned. I'll explain my laughter to everyone. I have followers, but I rarely tweet. I'm not trying to discourage anyone, but keep your tweet expectations low. But I think if you look for Bob Galen, I think that's my Twitter handle.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Bob. Okay, one person asked, how do you marry product owner responsibilities with the other market-facing product management responsibilities when they are centered in one person?
Oh, that's a boy. Now this has started. That's a great question, and it's setting the tone. Now I'm afraid of follow-on questions. That's what I'm finding is happening. Is it is an overloaded role. I do talk about this in the beginning of the book. That I say doing product ownership well is incredibly challenging because it has this outer half and an inner half. It has an outer half which is market related, true customer related, demo related, working with your senior leadership team on strategies, etc., business cases, all of that stuff. And then there's another day job which is care and feeding the team very well. So it's a very overloaded role. That's one of the reasons why I'm a proponent of one person can't always do it. I like an aggregated product owner role if that's where you're at. So if you have a product owner, a product manager who needs help writing stories, then get a business analyst to be coupled with them, to partner with them, and maybe get a tester to help write acceptance tests. And the one voice would be the product manager, but they're getting help in completing some of the internal roles. And as long as they're feeding the team well and doing the external parts well, I don't care, I don't care how many people can contribute to that. So that's one way to solve that. Another way to solve it, and I've seen this sort of be an evolution lately in product teams, is creating a product manager. So having a product manager who is independent of the product owners who are connected to teams. So creating sort of a hierarchy, an organizational hierarchy, where there's outwardly facing product managers, and you don't dissolve their role blend their role into product ownership, and then you hire or develop internal product owners who are connected to the teams. So you might have one product manager who's driving a product across 5 teams, and there's product owners for each of those 5 teams. So there's a hierarchical organizational structure. So outward facing and inward facing to try to address this sort of, the conflict, the overload conflict in trying to make, one person do too much. And I think that's a healthy, we did that at Eye Contact, which was a company I was working with not that long ago. And that was an evolutionary step that we were taking, is we were creating outwardly facing product managers and then inwardly facing product owners, and developing a really healthy view towards who's care and feeding the outside and who's care and feeding the team.
Excellent, Bob. Thank you. There are a few questions related to this topic. So this one might be similar, but I don't know. Maybe you can let me know if this is, too close to what you just answered. But this question asks, does the product owner have to be a single individual, or is it possible to have a team of product managers serve in the role of product owner?
So it's related to what I just said. I'll amplify it a little bit. You'll hear 2 schools of thoughts in the Agile community from my point of view. One is some people, and I think Schwaber does this, Ken Schwaber, the father of Scrum, talks about it being, there can be only one. And he talks about it being a singular, every team, you need a single product owner. I have seen that. I don't disagree with that. I think you need a singular voice, and you heard me talk about that in the slides. But what if one person can't do it all? And what do? Wait for them to try to force them to do it, or fire them, or put them on a performance improvement plan? Or do you create an aggregate role? And I found that to do true excellent Scrum product ownership, I don't know if I've ever met one person who could do all aspects of the role themselves. So I actually think that an aggregate role can be healthy, where you cobble together folks organizationally that fit the requirements for excellent product ownership. And you still need a singular voice. So it's not a committee. It's not product ownership by committee. That is an anti-pattern. But if you can aggregate folks to help out and deliver the responsibilities of product owner, I think that's healthy. But you'll hear both voices. I lean towards an aggregate role being okay. Some don't.
Okay, so this question said, can the product owner role be split among multiple people? Is that what you're saying the aggregate role is?
Yeah, and I say yes. But
okay.
there are voices in the Agile community that say no.
Okay. One of the person asked for comments on slide 9. If the team owns the backlog, who makes the final decision? And same with priorities, question mark.
The singular voice. So it's not management, it's not backlog ownership by committee. There needs to be a singular powerful product owner who is guiding the evolution, but they're not the sole person who's writing every story, writing every acceptance test, making every priority call. They're listening to their team, and they're gathering feedback from the team as to what the right. So there can be business flow to a set of priorities in the backlog, but that may be inappropriate for technical architectural design flow. So the last thing you want to do is ask the team to, I need this screen, this feature, this feature, this feature, and they tell you that they need to develop some architectural plumbing in order to support what you're asking for, and you say no, I want to defer that to later. Well, in your sprint demo, you're going to get the wonderful screens you asked for, but no plumbing for end-to-end behavior. Well, that was the wrong priority call. So I always coach teams that the business drives, the product owner drives, but it's this collaborative, inclusive, it takes a village view. So you want the one voice. You absolutely want that.
Okay, I think this actually leads very well into the next question, which may just be answered already, I would think. It says, even though you note a village to own the backlog, does the product owner still have the single voice of delivery? Do they have the final say?
And I think the answer is yes. And they learn and they make mistakes. So I've been in coaching situations. I'm a proponent of the product owner. I remind team members to expose their decisions, and if they're going to do, I ask them not to do work behind the scenes, but to put it on the backlog. Any work, even if it's redesign work, I encourage them not to do anything as skunk works or anything behind the scenes, to make it transparent, to collaborate with the product owner, to have those trade-off discussions. And that's part of it. That's that single voice. Now, there are times let's take the case where the product owner isn't listening well to their team. I will even, in those cases, I'll support them. I'm like, okay, we'll do that. And they will learn. I think part of it is making mistakes. And I've seen product owners that they make poor decisions sometimes. We all do. Every teams, Agile teams make mistakes. And then we re-examine why, and we make adjustments. And I think they learn as well to listen to their team more, to trust their team more, to not strong-arm their team, to really request guidance and request prioritization guidance as to what the right workflow is. Yes, they need to listen to the customer and the business side of things, but they also need to listen to the team.
Okay, excellent. And this one talks again about the village-owned backlog and says, is there such a thing as too much decentralization? And how do we coach the POs who are not able to lead the team? The village, it says, the village.
So I think it can get chaotic, and maybe that's a danger, and that's a potential anti-pattern to what I'm suggesting. I think what I'm talking about is mature. So let's probably talk about levels of maturity. These excellent practices are probably wrapped more towards what I would call mature Agile teams, where folks understand their role, they understand the balance, and you would rather have more contribution than less. I think if I had a startup Scrum team, I would be less village, less encouraging the village. I want it, but it would run the risk of being chaotic or lacking focus. So I think some of the factors you want to, yes, you can be chaotic. Yes, there can be too many voices. What do you do in that case? You emphasize the one voice. You emphasize the product owner. You emphasize the coach. The product owner should also be collaborating with the Scrum Master as a partner, as a leadership partner, as a leadership voice. But I think with immature teams have less, sort of less input factors, a smaller village, if you will, and then allow that and fostering that over time.
Okay, thank you so much, Bob. That's an excellent answer. Just because it's getting to be that time and we want to make sure people are, if they are able to hang on, we will take some more questions, Bob, if you have the time. And also I wanted to announce just very quickly the book winners so that we can close out today's session, and then people, if they do need to log off, can get back to their jobs. The first 5 people that asked questions, I'm just going to read the names real quick: Dan Saline, Michael Tanner, Paul Ambro, Debbie Susaki, and Kim Eckley. So they will all receive a copy of Bob's book, From Product Ownership, Balancing Value from the Inside Out. Also, the 5 other randomly selected book winners are Sherry Hartman, Kimberly Battle, Jose Solera, Tim Uttermark, and Vanessa Marzalak. So congratulations to all winners. We're very excited we could be offering the book today to you, and thank you again for joining our webinar. And we'll go back to a few more questions with Bob, if that's okay, Bob.
I have some time, so absolutely.
Okay, let's just go with the next one. It says, how complete should the backlog be before you start your first sprint?
I've oscillated on this. When I originally wrote the book, I think I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think it was more volatile. It was more ill-defined. It was, so for example, let's say that your release tempo. Let's try to answer this question from a release tempo perspective. A hypothetical team is doing 2-week sprints, but they have their releases quarterly, so they're having 4 or 5 2-week sprints, and then they push something to production release. So I would have early on said, oh, in order for them to start sprinting, they probably need epics for all 5 sprints. So they need some high-level stories for that release, for that entire 5-sprint release sequence. But they could start their first sprint with maybe 2 of those sprints, the backlog fleshed out for enough work for 2 of those sprints. I hope that makes sense to everyone. So I would have 5 sprints worth of epics, if you will, and maybe 2 sprints worth where I've drilled into those epics, into more finely grained stories. Nowadays, I'm doing more drill in. I'm looking for not so much in finely grained stories, but I'm recommending that teams do a little bit more release planning, and so maybe drill into 3 or 4 of those sprints before they start sprinting, so they have some directional awareness. They know where they're going. The other part of it is so that they can manage external stakeholder expectations around release dates and things like that. So I think that's the other part of why I'm emphasizing it, is doing a little bit more forecasting and having a little bit more communication there. I'm not demanding end-to-end finely grained stories for the release, but the window is wider, and I think a team, before they start, they need to know where they're going, and I think that helps the team. So it helps the business, but it really helps the team from a risk perspective, from an guiding their emergent architecture, knowing where the complexity is, it helps them. So I'm lately in my coaching, from 2009 to 2012, I'm sort of expanding the emphasis on release planning, and I think that's a healthier view before the teams dive in and start sprinting. Because I think teams, there is an anti-pattern that I've seen a lot lately in my coaching, where teams are sprinting and they don't know where they're going, is the best way I can identify it. And that's what I'm trying to avoid, this notion of, well, we're sprinting and we're delivering stuff, but we don't know, we don't know what the business expects fully, and we don't know if we're going to delight them or not. It's that alignment that's really important.
Right, excellent. Because this question has almost a good follow-up to that message. It says, how do you measure success in an Agile world relative to how you would in a waterfall world?
So the measurement is a weird thing. I mean, I think I talk a lot about measures lately, and it's changed from, so the first thing when you're talking about Agile measurement to me is you're moving from individual measurement to team-based measurement. I think that's an important sort of directional change, meaning you're not measuring the testers and the developers separately, and the documentation writers and the BAs. They're part of cross-functional teams, so you're measuring teams. Then you measure the output of those teams. You measure, are you realizing these Agile values? So you're looking at quality of deliverables. You're looking at, are we producing the highest value for our customers? Do we have a regular tempo? Are we being kind to our teams? So team morale via surveys and things is a measurement. And you're looking at throughput and quality and morale and value as being core types of measures, and then figuring out in your company, in your organization, what should you measure under those categories. So I think there's a shift. Now, from a product owner perspective, I think you care about all of those, but quality and value in the throughput side. What is our velocity? What is our capacity? Those are particularly interesting. I think all of them are interesting, but it's what are you driving from a PO perspective? It's that value proposition. Are we leveraging things well? One of the things that some companies are doing, the software as a service companies can do more of this, is they're measuring customer usage after deployment. So I know Salesforce does this. I know a bunch of companies that do this, that they pick priority based on what they think the value proposition will be, and then they deliver sprints and releases according to that, and they deploy that functionality. And they're not second-guessing their product organization, but they're actually verifying that the decision-making was sound, and so that they can improve the value-based decision-making. So they'll measure usage on the outbound side, and then they'll have a feedback loop into their prioritization and their road mapping. And I think that's a very healthy sort of closed loop on, just like you would close the loop on the development team of what they produce and is it high quality and are we having test escapes, you're closing the loop on realized customer value based on utilization.
Very good point, realized customer value. This question is really good as a follow-on. What advice do you have for a product owner that has an eager R&D team that wants to over-engineer every solution?
So, I don't know. Take them to lunch. I'm just kidding. I don't. I think that's indicative of. I think that's every team, and I think one of sort of the core values of Agile is this lean notion of just enough and just in time. So, I think I don't know if that's a good problem. I think it's sort of a good problem to have in that it's in the DNA of developers. I'm a developer in my roots, and I like solving problems, and I like complexity, and I like polishing things, and I think most developers, I like enough time to polish something perfectly. So I'm a perfectionist, I'm a problem solver, you know, all of those things. And I think most good developers are sort of in that purview. But one of the things that sort of counteracts that, you don't want to neutralize, but what counteracts that is this notion of sprint by sprint, emergent requirements, emergent designs, just enough, just in time, lean principles in deploying iterative solutions to the customer's problems. I think emphasizing that's sort of inherent in agility are these lean principles. And as a PO, and this is a case where you're not going it alone, your coaches, your Scrum Masters can be coaching the teams to just deliver it in small bits. You may get to complexity. You may get to, you know, design complexity and architectural, but we're not going to get there in one fell swoop. We're going to get there incrementally. And that becomes
Right.
sort of a mantra point or a heartbeat point for everything that we do.
Right. Okay, excellent. Thank you. This one asks, what are some effective strategies to get product owners to buy into the concept of a collaborative team? I think they need to have that already.
I mean, I think it comes with, gosh, this is going to sound trite, but you have to, you know, it comes with the job description. So you have to fake it in the beginning, pretend. If you don't believe in collaboration and you're a product owner, you better fake it and then start driving some realization that or give yourself some opportunities to see that you'll get better results as a team rather than being you're the Lone Ranger driving everything and there's a team that's just there to serve you. So I'll bring it back to myself. I'm an Agile coach. I came at that from the direction of management. I used to think that everyone was there to serve me. I told people what to do. I was a command and control manager. I had the creativity of the universe in my soul head, and I knew all the solutions, and I would drive that. And of course, I didn't have that, and I was naive, and I was young. Thank goodness I was young at the time, and I got a clue that said, you know what, the best things come from collaboration. The best results, the best business solutions, the best team experiences, the best, the best results for me as a person came from me fostering teams and collaboration. And then I discovered Agile, which has just reinforced that. So I think as a product owner, you have to, if you're not there, you have to work hard to put yourself in positions and open your mind and open your eyes to see that you're going to get better results. And I have yet to see any individual who can outperform an Agile team themselves. So I have bought into the power of the Agile, not just Agile, forget Agile, the power of teams and the power of collaboration and the power of the human spirit. I think that's incredibly powerful.
Wow, thank you, Bob, for that personal story. Going back to the active backlog grooming, this person's saying, what's the best way to do active backlog grooming? You say active, but what does that actually mean? Daily, weekly? Should we set aside time each day to do some of this?
So yes, yes, and yes. So it's the book talks about reserving. So I'll quote Schwaber. The original Scrum book talks about reserving 10% of the team's time for look ahead, what I call planning. So I use the term backlog grooming for that. And backlog grooming is writing stories, refining stories, breaking stories down, estimating stories, thinking about the design implications, thinking about the workflow for both very finely grained stories and for epics that may be months away. It's all of that. It's organically working on the plan continuously. So what does that mean, 10%? A lot of teams schedule regular grooming meetings, a couple times, a 1-hour meeting twice a week, and they just keep slogging away at it in a healthy way. And they change their view. They look at short-term stories. They might look at long-term stories in the same hour. Another way of doing it is to assign is the wrong word, but asking team members to groom stories on their own and then vet them with the team. So there's doing it in meetings, and then there's breaking stories up and allowing the team to take one or two and to flesh them out on their own and then bring their thoughts back to the team. And then the third way of grooming is sort of using user story spikes or research spikes or or analysis spikes. And that's an effective way of doing what I would call grooming activities, understanding activities in the sprints, because it's a story that represents some research. This isn't for trivial things. This is for like really hard things or complex things or new designs. We're doing a bit of architecture look ahead. So it's that combination, that multifaceted combination of continuously investing, meetings, group-based meetings, individual activity, and sprint-based activity, and then pulling it together into the backlog. And why don't we take, if we could, just maybe one more?
Yeah, that would be great. Okay, this one has a kind of a long question, but it sounds like a little bit of what you were saying about the collaborative, multifaceted approach. It says, one of the things, sorry, just went away. One of the things that happens with the team I'm on is that we go into the meetings, planning meetings, and many times we spend a lot of time rewording user stories, and it usually reduces the actual amount of time we spend planning. How can we avoid this? We spend a great deal of time in Sprint 0, the planning sprint, deriving these user stories, and we've seen several times over that when we get together, someone always says, well, it shouldn't really say this, it should say that, and we spend time rewriting them again and again.
So I think what that person's describing is again something that frustrates me, or it's not even a frustration, it's something, so an indication for me that a team is not spending enough time in grooming, however you want to define it, however you want to capture that activity of getting the backlog ready for execution. Let's call it that. For execution for a release and execution for a sprint is going into sprint planning and having ugly sprint planning. The purpose of sprint planning is not to refine stories. It's to have a final review of the set of stories that that are execution ready for this sprint, and then to plan them out and to even have some pre-strategy around that. And the uglier that meeting, the more hand-waving that goes on, the more definition that goes on, the more grooming that goes on in planning says that you didn't groom enough. I would actually much rather cancel that meeting, call it a failure, and go back and say we're going to do some grooming because we weren't ready for the planning. So what to do? The advice there, that's common, and I think it's draw the separation of investing in your backlog grooming, and what you'll see when you do that is you'll have much smoother sprint planning, and draw a separation between those two activities.
Wow, Bob, this has been incredible. Thank you so much for your time today. I know that many people have benefited from these answers, and I can tell that some of these struggles with the product owner, the role, the relationships, the collaboration, it's really incredible. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, and thank you, everyone, for joining us today. If you could just advance your slide deck one more slide, Bob, we'll just do a quick wrap-up. Someone did ask if the slides would be available later, and yes, we have recorded this webinar, so you'll have a notification within 24 hours that you can visit this webinar recording and listen to it again on Vimeo.com. We also have a few other webinars that we've performed over the last, I don't know, 6 months or so, and those are available on Vimeo.com as well, and we just provide the URLs here. So again, thanks to everyone for joining us. Thank you to Bob, so much thanks to Bob. Thank you for your book, Bob, so that we could give it out today to many of our listeners, and we really just appreciate everyone's time. Thank you. Bob?
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you. Have a good day.